everyone. My name is Milton Little. I'm one of the orthopedic trauma attendings at Cedars-Sinai, also the fellowship director down there. And today I have the pleasure of interviewing one of my mentors, Dr. Daphne Beingessner, who is a full professor at Harborview Medical Center and someone who has really kind of helped me in terms of kind of my thoughts about upper extremity fracture care, and who's been a great friend and someone who I learned a lot from during my year at Harborview. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Beingessner, and hopefully we'll be able to get some insight into how she's been so successful in her career and has been able to achieve some of the things that she had desired to do, as well as maybe some of the mentors and the people who have helped her get to where she is now.
Good morning, and thanks for having me.
No problem. Well, let's jump right into it. I guess the first question I have for you is, what's your full role currently at Harborview? And then we'll get to how you got to that position.
Sure. So I am currently a professor at University of Washington with my practice based at Harborview Medical Center, doing trauma. I'm also the vice chair for quality improvement for the Department of Orthopedics. And I'm a full-time trauma surgeon. So I spend the majority of my time on clinical work, but I have a lot of busy background administrative duties as well.
I'm sure. As you learn, as you get into practice, the administrative and background work tends to take up far more time than we expected it to.
Yeah.
I know where you're from, but can you kind of tell the rest of the viewers kind of where you grew up, where you trained, and how you ended up at Harborview?
Sure. So I grew up in a relatively small city in Canada. It's called Waterloo, Ontario. It's about an hour from Toronto. And I went to medical school at University of Western Ontario, which is in London, Ontario. Basically, if you draw a straight line between Toronto and Detroit, it's about halfway between the two. And I did before that, I did my undergrad at University of Waterloo in both math and in science. And then I did medical school, and I stayed on there for a residency. And I did an upper extremity fellowship in London, Ontario, and then I came out here to Seattle to do my trauma fellowship, and I never left, so I'm still here. Orthopedic surgery is a career that I stumbled upon, and it really was a fluke. I had zero interest in orthopedic surgery. I grew up next door to an orthopedic surgeon who was a big kind of hockey playing big guy, and that's what I thought that orthopedics was, that it was all sports, and you had to be a big guy to do it. And so when I did my medical school rotation on surgery, we had to do orthopedics. I actually tried to get out of it, but they said, no, you have to do it. And the computer randomly turned out that I went to the small hospital called St. Joseph's Hospital, where I met my mentor, Dr. Graham King, who got me interested in upper extremity surgery. So, after 2 weeks on my orthopedic rotation, I realized that I really liked it. They realized that it was a good fit as well. And my mentor encouraged me to apply to orthopedics. So I really had no interest, and then did a complete 180 in a 2-week span. And here I am doing orthopedic surgery.
Nice. Yeah, sometimes it takes running into the right person to help kind of lead you in that direction. Is there a piece of advice or a very kind of important memory that stands out in terms of your experiences with Dr. King?
Yes, I think so. I think in general, for young up and coming people in medical school, really keep an open mind, because I had, as I say, zero interest in doing that. And I found somebody like Dr. King who was not only could see what I was good at and what I had an aptitude for, but then he went the extra mile and was really encouraging. And I still remember walking to the PACU after a case, and he said to me, you should do orthopedics. And I said, well, I haven't done any research, and I have all these people in my class that want to do this. And he said, I will help you. let's go to my office. I have a project that you would be perfect for. And he got me going immediately on a project. And it happened that quickly. So I think, keeping an open mind through your training to what you might be good at, and then listening to people who are actually observing you and have an idea of what you would be good at as well is really important.
From a standpoint of kind of learning from him as a mentor, what are some of the keys that you have taken from him that you have used for your own mentees?
Graham taught me how to work hard first and foremost. He was always the first one in the hospital. Oftentimes as a resident, I'd be rounding the corner to come and start my rounds, and he'd have already seen all his patients. And so he taught me how to work hard and then stay interested. He ran a big lab for upper extremity biomechanics, and he taught me how to do biomechanics research and how to pursue academics as well. So I think he was sort of the complete package, a fantastic clinician, a fantastic researcher, and then somebody who actually spent time encouraging more junior people to come up behind him. He's always happy when he sees what I'm doing, and he's excited when he sees the crazy fractures that I fix in the upper extremity at Harborview. And he's always encouraging, and he's been like that since I was in my early 20s. So, more than 25 years, he's been my mentor. And so I think that enthusiasm has carried through for years.
That's pretty phenomenal. One of my memories of us at Harborview, I guess I should say a couple of them, are that, we ended up on call together. And for some reason, our Friday nights or Saturday nights always ended up with us operating the entire night until first thing in the morning and going to eat breakfast and kind of rehashing the night. And, it's for some reason, I don't know if it's me or if I have bad luck, but it still seems to happen to me a lot when I'm here. The unfortunate thing is that, we usually cover the full weekend. So the next day I'm just there still operating. But the residents are always like, well, how do you keep going? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I learned from my mentors, and, it's late, but there's work, and it's not like the work's going to stop. It's still going to be there. It's still going to need to get taken care of. So you just stay on top of it. And, one of the things that people asked was, well, how do you stay focused on it? And I was like, well, staying focused in the middle of the case isn't the hard part. Is that time in between when you're waiting to get started on the next case, where you really have to kind of, get a little bit of shut eye so you can stay focused, laser focused while you're working.
Yeah, for sure.
One thing that I was always curious, and I know since how long have you been at Harborview now?
I started my fellowship here in 2003, so it's almost 19 years now.
So you've seen a lot of people come through. I don't want to put you on the spot, but it's always interesting to kind of hear who are the people you think of as the mentees who have had the most influence on you in terms of things that you've learned from them, or the way they've helped shape the way you teach, or helped you change some of the things that you do.
Yeah, I've had a lot of great people that I've been fortunate to work with over the years. So many fellows, so many residents, and I can't even say specifically certain names, because I think there's so many of them that I would be leaving people out. But I've had people that have taught me about work things, about even just little things like great ideas that they picked up in their residency that they've shown me on how to improve things that I can do here surgically. I've had a lot of people who've had varieties of life experiences, and they've taught me about how they've coped with things, even people, in the realm of diversity. I was one of the very early female trauma surgeons. There wasn't very many when I was around. It's different when I first started. It's certainly different now and changing, but I've had people who've come through who've given me ideas on how they've dealt with that, and how they've managed through their career with that as well. So I think I have a huge variety. You're one of those people who I've loved knowing over the years, and has, always, taught me about how to have a good life outside of orthopedics as well. Love getting pictures of your kids and seeing that, there is life outside this career that can be all consuming. I will mention, a couple names. I think of people like Samir Mehta, who's done huge things administratively and running, is a go-getter and has sort of shown how to do, fill his time, but also have outside of work things. But Samir is one of those guys that'll answer your email at 3 a.m. It's like, well, how are you still up? And he's sort of shown me how to stay energized. I think guys like Mike Gardner, who've done incredible things on research, have also just been fantastic for me to watch and learn throughout their career.
Nice. Well, you brought it up, so I think it is important to think about. I know you like spending time with your nieces and nephews. I know you like traveling, and you're an accomplished pianist, but what else do you like to do kind of during your time off, when or if you get time off?
Yeah,
to kind of stay grounded and balanced?
for sure. So you just mentioned it at family. Now during the pandemic, I've seen a lot less of them, but it's turned into more FaceTime and texting, which is okay. Music's been a huge part of my life, and so I continue to do a lot of that whenever I can. I was a late bloomer when it came to athletics, and so about 5 or 6 years ago, I got a personal trainer, and I've met with her every week for the last 5 years. I don't think we've actually missed a week. Occasionally, we've had to do a program that she's programmed online for me, and that was life changing. So I love fitness stuff now. I started running in my 40s. I do a lot of lifting, I do yoga, and that's a big part of my life now outside of work that I just love. So I think all of those things, then obviously spending time with friends and those types of things like everybody. But I think the fitness stuff, which I added later in life that I kind of wish I had started earlier, has been a huge made life better, and having somebody to help me with that has certainly made life better.
Nice. So that's pretty amazing. And then the other thing you mentioned was kind of what you've learned from some of the mentees you've had in terms of diversity. I think oftentimes people ask, well, what are some of the hard things that you have faced because of diversity? But I think that's it's a dry question. We ask it all the time. I think what's something for you that you have been able to implement or been able to kind of, change in your career because of your experiences as a female?
Yeah. So I think, early on when I trained, as I say, there was even a year of my residency where I was the only female in the whole program, and I didn't actually feel any different than anybody else. I just was one of the residents. And then throughout my career, I've gotten to where I want to be. I'm a trauma surgeon at Harborview, so it really hasn't, quote, held me back in any way. But there's certainly little things on a daily basis even that come up. I'm asked if I'm the nurse, or somebody will talk to my resident as if they're the attending and I'm just the helper. And so those things still occur regularly, and I think I've learned over the years, although it's important to point out those things at times, there's also times where you just have to kind of let it go and put your head down and work and understand, sometimes people aren't doing this because they're, out to get you, or they have something against you. They just automatically assume that. And sometimes they just need a little bit of education. And then I just don't let it get to me as much, I think, as I've gotten older. And I've talked to other people in similar circumstances, and I've watched trainees have the same things happen to them, being mistaken for, not being the doctor, even though they've introduced themselves as the doctor. And we've talked about, how are you going to manage that? And so we've had good conversations about those things. And having done this for so long, they've been able to come to me and say, well, how do you manage when this happens to you? And it may not be just the male female thing, it's other areas of diversity as well. But I think there's a common theme, and watching somebody who's older, who's been through it for a long time, and who can kind of, as say, just let things go a little bit as you get older, while making sure that you maintain your identity and that people know who you are, is an important balance. And it's something I've been fortunate that I've been able to talk to people about through the years when they've run into these instances.
I think I learned so much every day just doing this. And learning how to cope with things, but also learning kind of all the areas where it really may not impact me, or I may
Yeah.
not notice it impacting me on a day-to-day basis. But other people may notice it, and I'm not even, I
Yeah,
have
for
been doing
sure.
this so long that it's like, well, I got to show up. I have to do my job. I have to be thorough as possible, and work through whatever things we face.
Yeah, for sure. And I say it's something that probably as I've gotten older, I've noticed more and not less, which has been surprising to me. I think in my early years, I just kind of had my head down and working. And then as I've kind of come up, and I've noticed even a lot in administrative roles, it's a little bit, some of these differences come up. And, sometimes I find my opinions being repeated by others, and then given, other people being given credit for my ideas. And I'm thinking, I just said that. And I didn't notice that actually as much early on. I think I just wasn't paying attention as much. And so now I've noticed those things more. But I'm also older and able to kind of cope with those things more too, because I realize there's life outside of all of this as well.
Yeah. And before we get to more life outside of this, I think something that I think is, are there cases that really get your blood boiling, or not boiling, but get you really excited? Any specific cases that you really remember, or that stand out for you?
Yeah, there's certain patients over the years. I always sort of joke, there's always about a list of 10 patients in my head at all times that I'm worried about, either wounds or nerves or something's going on with them. And then, they come back for their 3-month visit. I can check them off the list because they're doing okay. So there's always that running in the background. But then there's always those patients that you will never forget that you saw throughout the years. And I can remember specifically one young girl who was about 18, and this was early in my practice. And she was in a bad car accident, and her mom actually was about 20 cars back and had gotten caught in this traffic jam and had no idea why she was stuck in traffic. And then she suddenly realized, when she was getting phone calls eventually, that it was her daughter who was in this terrible accident. And she had multiple extremities injured. She ended up with, she had a stroke at one point. She had all kinds of issues, and she recovered through all of that. And she's one of the most spunky patients that I've ever met. And every time she came to clinic, she was happy. She resolved all of her stroke symptoms. She was able to walk despite, devastating pilon injuries and foot injuries, as well as, bilateral femurs, bad upper extremity injuries. But I just saw her recently within the last year. She came because she has arthritis, not surprisingly, but she's now in her mid-30s. She's married. She has 2 kids. She's the same person, happy and living life. And I think about, if we didn't do what we did for her back in those early days, she wouldn't be here. She was one of those patients that was critically ill on arrival and could have died. And now there she is, coaching her kids' baseball teams and living life and doing well. And those are the patients over the years that, we all have those moments of, why am I doing this to myself? I'm exhausted. And a lot of these people don't appreciate this. But then those patients like that stand out. And so she's one of those ones that I just saw her within the last few months. And it was, if she saw me, I saw her, big hug, great to see you. And those are the ones that really stick with you.
Yeah. There should be a way to sprinkle at least a few of those patients in every single clinic.
Yeah.
Just to and you can't put them you can't stack them back to back. It should be one in the morning and then one in the mid afternoon when you're starting to
between all the draining wounds, then it's that one.
You're like, yes. I'm just gonna stay in here a little bit longer. I'm gonna hide from everybody and hang out with you for a little bit.
Yes.
But yeah, those people really make this job so worth it. And so kind of fulfilling. From a let's see what else. From a I actually had from a mentorship standpoint, have you developed some tools in which to deal with mentees or residents or fellows who are kind of struggling? And I know everybody has you kind of have to take a different approach to everybody, but do you have some basic kind of approaches that you take to them and how to kind of help them fulfill or at least live up to their potential?
Yeah, I think, we run into a variety of circumstances like that, whether people are struggling with life outside of work, whether they've struggled with, a bad episode that's happened during their career, or an issue or a mistake. And then there's people that just kind of need general help along the way. So I think number one in those circumstances is being available, and then listening. So really, when people come to me with problems, and in my QI role, I end up with a lot of these kind of things that have happened. And so I have to be in touch with people either about complaints, or they had a complaint or a problem. And the number one thing is just to sit and listen to them. So, rather than, it's very easy as somebody who's older to start listening to these circumstances, and then right away you're formulating a solution to their problem in your head. And that's not how to start. The way to start is really just to sit and listen and ask them questions and gather information and let people talk it out. And a lot of times people know what's the problem is. They know exactly what they need to do to get better. They know what they should have done in this circumstance. They just need to get to that conclusion themselves. So I think that talking people through in an environment where they can listen, they can feel comfortable, they can know it's confidential. If they're struggling, they can come and talk to somebody. I think all those things are important. So that's my number one kind of tool for helping people. And then just identifying areas that they need improvement, and again, being available to talk through issues. I've had people that had problems with, surgeons making a mistake, blaming them, and it wasn't their fault. Well, we've talked through how to manage that. I've had people who've had legal things to deal with, and they've had to come and talk through that. I've had people have intensive reviews that they have to go to, and they're just scared. They don't know what that's going to be about. And so we go through those things. I think just identifying what they're worried about is important. And then there's the whole other group of people that are just struggling with surgical skills. And so just trying to get those people in operating as much as possible. And a lot of folks, I'm like, you're not delegating anything to a junior resident yet. If I'm working with somebody senior, you're doing these cases. So paying attention. And it's hard as you get older because, I just want to get the case done and go home. So it's very easy for me to sort of say, you know what, you're not doing well with this, or you're struggling. And so I'm going to do this part. And, taking the time to step back and letting people do more is important. Although that's one of the harder parts of being a mentor, I think.
Yeah, it is. God, taking your hands off the wheel is, even now for me, like 8 years in or 7.5 years in, I'm like, can we just move your hand, just a little, let me grab your hand, please, because
Yeah.
you're not hearing me right now. And
Yeah.
I always struggle with it, and knowing when to step away, when to be there, when to what you want, you ask for what you want, and when they don't do it, you're like, I don't know how else to explain that.
Yes, exactly. It's challenging. It's an ongoing process. And I remember my first 5 years of practice, I would say every time the residents and fellows switched over, it was stressful. And I was like, oh, here we go again. I have to start teaching somebody all this stuff over again. And that gets easier as you get older. And the other thing is, as you get more experience, you can see stuff about to happen that's shouldn't happen. I always joke, there was a lot of broken K-wires in my first 6 months of practice because I realized people were just turning the drill on full speed and pulling it. But it took me a while to figure out that's what they were doing. And that rarely happens now because I can be preemptive with my teaching on all those things. And it's to the point now that it's kind of a running joke with the fellow and the resident on the team. They're like, the end of the day, I'm like, I didn't get to put in any hardware today, you guys. I didn't put in a single screw. And so sometimes at the very end of the day, they'll, for the last one, they'll be like, do you want to put this one in? I'm like, no, you've done it. And the other joke is that, the only locking bolts I ever get to put in a nail is when somebody missed. So, we only get to do the hard ones as the mentors, and that's okay. And so, if I get to the end of the day and the x-ray looks really good and I didn't put in a single piece of hardware, that's a good day. And I know that I've done a good job teaching people.
That's a good way of looking at things. I call it Groundhog Day, in terms of when the residents come on. Just like the movie Groundhog Day, it's just like you start over again every 6 weeks or every 3 months or whatever the time period is, teaching the same things over and over over again.
Yes, for
Yeah.
sure.
So, I think one, I don't want to hold you too long. I know you got to get to clinic. One last question, I think, what are you most proud of about your career thus far? And then the follow-up is, what aspirations do you have, or what else do you want to accomplish with your career?
That's a really good question. I'm proud of all of the patients that have gotten better, and I'm proud of the work that I've accomplished with those people, to get them back to their life. And some of those patients, it's not something showy, and it's not something that's going to make me famous, or it's not something that's out there for the world to see. It's between me and the patients. And I think I'm proud of all of those people that have walked out of my clinic doing really well with their life. And so I think that's the number one reason that I wanted to be a doctor, was to get people better. And it's easy to lose sight of that with everything that's going on in academic medicine, in medicine in general. And going back to that foundation of getting people better, and then knowing that I've accomplished that, I think is really the number one thing I'm proud of in my job. What else would I like to accomplish? I'm fortunate I'm getting to sort of that downslope part of my career, where I don't have to accomplish a lot more, which is nice. It's everybody gets a little tired at this stage, but I would like to keep teaching more. And I sort of took a big break from doing a lot of that stuff in this middle part of my career, just so I could focus on my clinical work, and I do a lot of administrative work here. But I think it would be nice to sort of teach a little bit more, particularly with upper extremity trauma, over these next probably less than 10 years of what I have left for my career. And so that would be my main goal, is to kind of keep spreading the word and getting better at upper extremity surgery, and trying to find better solutions for some of the more challenging fractures, and then continue to work on teaching those things.
Good. I think that's phenomenal. This has been a pleasure. Hopefully it hasn't been too burdensome
It's
for you.
fantastic talking to you, Milton. I love seeing you. And
You
it's
as well.
awesome. Yeah.
You as well. Well, have a wonderful day, and thank you for your time and your amazing thoughts. And I look forward to talking to you soon.